Hey everybody, Zach again at newtutorial.com, coming in making a video for you today. I want to do a video on the seventh day. This is something I get a question about every so often, and it usually comes from two scenarios, two situations where people who have discovered the Torah, they're new to Torah, and they discover that it's still valid, and they rediscover that commandment where it says to remember the Sabbath, and somehow Christianity forgot that one. But it says to remember the Sabbath, to keep it holy. And so they have this new revelation, and they discover that there's a Seventh-day Adventist church in town. And they're like, hey, and they're looking for fellowship because the place they're at now just doesn't keep the Sabbath. In fact, they're laughing at them for all this Torah nonsense that they're discovering in the Bible. And so like, maybe I can have better fellowship at the seventh day. And so they go there, and eventually they realize there's all kinds of other issues, and they're not really into Torah. And see, that's just one example. The other example is someone who's in the Seventh-day church already, and they are thinking that they're already on the right path. They've already got this Torah thing figured out, and they've discovered Torah from the seventh-day perspective already. And so they kind of have this idea that Ellen G. White had it all figured out all the time, all along. And so isn't that just wonderful? So usually those two things, so and it's weird because the seventh day, as I've discovered, I'm coming out of the Baptist background, the seventh day is just a weird denomination. It's unlike most others in Christianity, because most denominations of Christianity basically have this overriding authority, denominational authority set up. Like, for instance, for the Baptist Church, it's the Southern Baptist Convention. If you go to a Southern Baptist church, there's a Southern Baptist Convention. And they basically set the doctrine, and they set the teaching guidelines, and they have their own publications, and Southern Baptist churches go along with that doctrine, and, and those publications, and, seldom veer off of it. And if they veer off it too much, they can get corrected by the convention can come in, or the denominational authority can come in and say, hey, you're getting off track here. And other denominations are like that as well. Obviously, the Catholic Church is like that. But Seventh Day, I have seen Seventh-day churches all over the board on certain topics. I have met Seventh-day Adventists who go to Seventh-day churches who celebrate Easter, and I have met Seventh-day churches, people who go to Seventh-day churches who don't celebrate Easter. I have met Seventh-day Adventists who keep the feast, some who don't keep the feast. I have met Seventh-day Adventists who eat meat. I have met Seventh-day Adventists who don't eat meat, who are vegetarians. And just, it goes all down the spectrum of all kinds of different things. So there's really no denominational authority. It's just people at whatever church they're at, they open up usually Ellen G. White's writings, and then they try to, basically interpret those however they see fit. And, there's even there's a lot, it's funny, even our Seventh-day church here in town had a split recently over some silly things. And it stemmed from the Sabbath. My point is that Seventh-day churches are all over the board. And for me, it goes back to time and time again, the words of Moses. And you have all these denominational authorities, whether it's the Methodist and John Wesley, or whether it's Mormonism and Joseph Smith, Ellen White. Ellen White is the person that they hold up at most Seventh-day churches, and that's their guideline, that's their doctrinal authority. And with each prophet or prophetess, in this case, you have to test that to Moses and see where it comes down to. And I'm sorry, guys, but Ellen G. White just fails the words of Moses. She fails the Deuteronomy 13 test. Let's go read Deuteronomy 13. Now, there's a couple key verses here. If there arise among you a prophet or prophetess, or a dreamer of dreams that gives thee a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder comes to pass, whereas he spake unto thee, saying, let us go after other gods which thou hast not known, and let us serve them. Now, full stop. Most Seventh-day people will be like, see, well, that's other gods. We worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, not so fast. Because you really have to go down to verse 4 and 5. Ye shall walk after the Lord your God, and fear him, and keep his commandments, and obey his voice, and ye shall serve him and cleave unto him. And that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has spoken to turn you away from the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, to thrust thee out of the way which the Lord thy God commanded thee to walk in. so shalt thou put evil away from the midst of thee. Because here's the deal. If you're not keeping the commandments, the judgments and statutes that the Father, he gives his people, then you're walking a different way and thus worshiping another God. So you can say, I'm worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but if you don't follow the commandments, the way in which he says to walk in and be obedient to those ways, then you're not worshiping him. He says, I know you say you're worshiping me, but that's not, I told you not to, I didn't tell you to do those things you're doing, so obviously you're worshiping another God. He sees it as if you're worshiping another God. And so there's the big deal. You can say one thing, but your actions say something else. So you have to go back and look at Ellen G. White and be like, well, okay, what is the things that she commanded? Folks, she is all over the board. When you start, first of all, she didn't keep the feast. She basically said that they were done away with. She has all kinds of rules and regulations on dress that aren't found in Torah. She has all kinds of rules and regulations on diet that aren't found in Torah. I mean, she even speaks against mustard and sugar and obviously alcohol, spices, even apple cider. What's wrong with apple cider? She says if you have apple cider, there's a chance it could ferment and that becomes alcohol, which is a sin. I mean, there's all kinds of rules and regulations that this woman has come up with that aren't found in Torah. Let me give you some examples on the feast. This is from the Ellen G. White Estate. And this is from William Fagel, Director, Ellen G. White Estate Branch Office. Thank you for contacting the Ellen G. White Estate. I find nothing in Mrs. White's writings to support the idea that Christians should observe the feast today. She herself did not observe them. Okay, so big warning flag right there. You can find examples online where people are asking, hey, did Ellen White keep the feast? This is Ellen G. White's own words. Christ was standing at the point of transition between two economies and their two great festivals. He, the spotless Lamb of God, was about to present himself as a sin offering, he that would thus bring an end to the system of types and ceremonies that for 4,000 years had pointed to his death. As he ate the Passover with his disciples, he instituted in its place the service that was to be the memorial of his great sacrifice. The national festival of the Jews was to pass away forever. Well, that just goes against Moses. The service which Christ established was to be observed by his followers in all the lands and through all the ages. But we know that Moses said these feasts are forever throughout all your generations. But this directly contradicts Moses. Deuteronomy 13, fail. Right there. That's how you tell a false prophet. I mean, the Father made it really easy and simple for his people. Anyone coming out nowadays or back in the past and says to do something different than what Moses said, fails. Done. It's over. Yeshua, on the other hand, kept referring back to Moses. And I heard it recently said that, well, he added commandments. He said, whoever lusts for a woman, has committed adultery. And that's not in the words of Moses, so Yeshua fails the Deuteronomy 13 test. How can you commit adultery without first committing adultery in your heart? Because the Father knows your heart, and that was the whole problem with this people back when they came out of Egypt. It wasn't on their hearts and minds, and that's why the new covenant, Jeremiah 31:33, is talking about their hearts and minds, the Torah on their hearts and minds. Because if the Torah is really on your hearts and mind, you know that by going down the road of lusting after another woman, it leads to adultery. You've already committed adultery with her in your heart. And so the Messiah, Yeshua, is just making it a heart issue, which is what the Father wanted his people to do in the first place. If you worship me with your whole heart, in spirit and in truth, you'll recognize this sin before you commit the sin. It's that simple. Back to Ellen G. White. You have a lot of fails here. You have all kinds of rules and regulations. If you go through her writings, and just do that. I mean, yeah, it's the same thing. I did a video not too long ago, well, it was a while ago, on Joseph Smith and all of the rules and regulations that aren't found anywhere in Moses and that are found in the Book of Mormon for the Mormons. Big fail. Big fail of the test right there, folks. And so, I had a lot of Mormons come down to me, but I'm sorry, Mormons, there's nowhere in the Torah it says you can't drink coffee. Okay? There's no, in fact, or alcohol. In fact, it says the exact opposite in a number of places. I did a whole video on how many positive verses there are about alcohol in the Torah, in the Bible. So you have major contradictions here. It says, don't be a drunk. That's a lot different than getting drunk, than being a drunk. Someone who's drinking all the time and forsaking his family and being a sluggard and not working. Torah's got all kinds of verses about that. But when it comes to alcohol, I mean, you can go watch the video. I'll put it up in the cards above. Anyway, this fails. Ellen G. White fails. And so this is something that you can apply to all kinds of prophets today. I mean, all kinds of preachers, teachers, whatever. If you're teaching something against Moses, you failed. Deuteronomy 4:2. Let's go look at that. You shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall you diminish aught from it, that ye may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you today. Don't take away. Don't add anything. But see, there's all kinds of people today who add and take away a bunch of stuff that, is not there. And I'm sorry, but you fail. There's, let's go ahead and look at this. Matthew 24, verse 5. I did a whole video on this. And again, I'll put it in the cards above. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am in fact the Christ. I am the Christ, and shall deceive many. What that's saying is, there's going to come a lot of people, and they're going to say that I am in fact the Messiah, but they're going to deceive many. See, they're going to deceive you by taking you away from the words of the Father, by taking you away from his commandments, statutes, and judgments, because that's what he sees as obedience. That's what he sees as true worship of him. If you're doing something different than what I command you, I don't know what God you're worshiping, but it ain't me. And so, again, you have all kinds of people today who failed at Deuteronomy 13 test. And, Deuteronomy 4:2 is do not add or take away. And Yeshua himself says, many will come and deceive. See, when you think about deception, it says, the serpent beguiled me all the way from the beginning. Hath God said, ? It was deception. The serpent beguiled her, deceived her into doing something other than what the Father had commanded. Very simple. Deception is going away from what the Father says. And here's Yeshua right there saying, so many people are going to come and they're going to deceive you. And over and over again, I've done lots of videos on this. Yeshua keeps pointing back to the words of Moses. If they have Moses and the prophets, if they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, they're not going to be convinced by one raised from the dead. Very simple. Very, very simple. And today there's so many, there's still things out there. It's a big thing going around right now. Matthew Nolan. And, I'm sure Matthew Nolan is a great guy. And, I hate bringing up names in videos, but I do sometimes. And, help me understand. I don't understand what, he's teaching. I can't, because he's saying that some things aren't valid anymore. You don't have to do these things. These things you don't have to worry about anymore. But see, to me, that goes against what the words of Moses were. It totally contradicts Deuteronomy 4:2. You shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall you diminish aught from it, that ye may keep the commandments of the Lord your God which I command you. Do not add and take away. And so some of the things that Mr. Nolan is teaching really seem to take away. And I don't understand it. And I can't, I hit this roadblock each time when I read about Deuteronomy 13 and I see all of the verses and the prophets that talk about, the Levites and the sacrifices that are going to happen in the millennial reign when our Messiah comes. And, so many examples of the Levitical system, even in the New Testament. And he says there are no mentions of the Levitical system in the New Testament. And I'm like, there's tons. I don't want to get into all that. I'm just saying, when you start to take away, when you start to add, I have a big red flag that flies up, and I have problems with that. And I have so many of my friends who are going down this path, and I'm like, no, stop, come back, this is error. Just because you found a pastor that speaks with a British accent doesn't mean the world has suddenly turned into a giant green M&M. The Cubs still aren't going to win the World Series. Happy Meals will always be unhealthy for you, and pastors everywhere will still lie, cheat, and tickle your ears just to get your money. Now you've got to wake up, sweetheart. You're going to be late for school. Oh, you wet the bed. Why can't I have a normal child without these problems? Go home, read your Bible. Thanks.